Title Talk. Love Identifies True Christian Congregation.
How do you know what's real? How do you know what's true? You turn on a news station and you watch a story, and then you turn on the other station and it's the same story, but it doesn't look like the same story. And in fact, both stations saying the other station isn't telling you the truth. How do you know? And now, they've had these for a little while, but they're getting more and more advanced. They have these apps you can have on your phone or have on your computer, and you can take a photo of anybody and have them turn it into a video and have them reciting stuff they've never said. You could have them sing, have them dance, anything. How do you know what's true? And in matters of faith or finding the true Christian congregation, well, that's really important. How do you know what's true? Because it means the difference between serving God acceptably or not, between having a relationship with God or not, between finding spiritual fulfillment for ourselves or not. So it's vitally important that we're able to find the truth. The thing is, according to one source, there's 45,000 different denominations across the globe that call themselves Christian. You couldn't look through all of them in your whole lifetime, could you? 45,000. So what's a way that without having to go through 45,000 that you can find a true congregation? Now, obviously, pretty much everybody here, we feel we found it, right? There may be some people looking, but we feel we found it. Some people come in, they say, the very first meeting they come to Jehovah's Witnesses, they say, we know you have the truth. Well, how can they do that? They haven't really gotten a deep understanding of doctrines and things like that. And take a look at John chapter 13 with me. That's a familiar text here, verse 34 and 35. Jesus gives us the answer. He says, I'm giving you a new commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you, you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love among yourselves. Well, what is this? What is this particular love? We're going to examine that today. A lot of people have been disappointed. They look for true religion. They go into a church, and they see some things that maybe feel holy, right? Like robes, and they see stained glass windows, and there's incense burning, and there's idols, and it kind of feels holy. Or they go into another one, and there's a guy in a three-piece suit. He's got an electric guitar, and people are singing and dancing. They're healing people, and they're speaking in tongues. But they don't see the love that they're looking for. And Jesus said the other things weren't what's going to identify his followers. In fact, Paul said those things would be done away with, but one thing would be left, and that would be love. And what they do see sometimes that you shouldn't see in the true Christian congregation is prejudice due to social standing, financial status, education, or race, or something else that divides people. And so they're disappointed. And even if there is a friendliness, is it the love that Jesus talked about? Well, we're going to dissect that love today. We're going to look at 5 different things, 5 aspects of that love, and see how it really is that you don't have to go through all 45,000. You can discount a whole bunch of them very quickly, and we'll see why, and how it points to Jehovah's Witnesses having the true Christian congregation. We're also going to look at a primary way that we can express this love. And when we go through the talk, we ask ourselves, okay, I'm in the true Christian congregation, so how am I doing a good job with showing this love in a way that others can see that this is the true Christian congregation? Let's go to Romans chapter 12 and verse 10. And we'll see something that comes off of this love, right? Romans chapter 12 and verse 10, how it's expressed. In brotherly love, have tender affection for one another, and showing honor to one another, take the lead. So we wouldn't expect to see friendliness that ends at the door, right? A lot of people can be friendly, but we'd see more of a family. We'd see this tender affection. So how do Jehovah's Witnesses express this love. Can we have the first image, please? We see love in action. So this is the first aspect, right? Is love in action is what we would expect to see. What do we notice about this picture that tells us that it's love in action? Well, if you see there's containers there, and they're actually labeled for each day. I don't know if there's more, but there's at least 3 days there. What does that tell you? That tells you that love and care went into that sister and her daughter preparing things for this other sister. We also don't see barriers of age or of race here. And we see tender affection, the touch, the warm smile. We see people who actually care about each other. And that's what we expect to see in the Christian congregation. So we ask ourselves, how do we react to a need that we see in the congregation? Do we wait to get assigned? Do we wait for somebody to tell us? Or do we notice a need and then we move to fill it? And do we go, she could have made a casserole and just said, well, this will last you for a week, just keep reheating it. But she didn't, right? She made something different for each day. Why? Because she loves her. So she went beyond what was necessary because of love. And we ask ourselves, do we do that? And again, it overcomes these barriers. So we have to make sure that we don't allow barriers from our past, right? Because Jehovah's Witnesses are people that maybe before we learned the truth, we had barriers. Maybe there was people we wouldn't associate with because of the things I spoke about before. But Jehovah's Witnesses work hard to tear those down so they don't exist. You can take the image down now, please. And I can tell you that in my experience, I cannot tell you how many meal trains I've seen. How many times people are visiting others in the hospital. How many times people are helping each other out, a flat tire, whatever it is, because of love. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing. But more than that, no doubt some in this congregation and thousands of others have willingly given of themselves and of their resources, their financial resources, to go to disaster relief, right? Likely some people in this congregation have gone to Puerto Rico, southern Florida, New Orleans, southern New York, back when that happened, and maybe California now because of the fires, to go and help rebuild homes, help tear out walls, do stuff they wouldn't have done before maybe even. And that is based on love. Look at Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 3. And here's the result when that love is shown and what we see in the true Christian congregation. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 3. Earnestly endeavoring to maintain the oneness of the Spirit in the uniting bond of peace. So imagine you're that person, your house is destroyed. And here comes somebody that you don't know, several people that you don't know, and they're coming and they start cleaning out your house. And they start rebuilding your house. They're giving you spiritual comfort. They're bringing you food and water. Don't you see how that really creates this bond now? Because they treat you like family, even though they don't know you. Now, we don't have the picture up good. So we're going to move on to the second one. So that was the first one that we see love in action. And it's really expressed even by going beyond. Now, secondly, love moves Jehovah's Witnesses to reach out to non-Jehovah's Witnesses, especially in presenting the good news to them. And that is done, why? Because love, because it isn't natural. It isn't something that we would normally do, go knock on a stranger's door and just to talk to them. And it doesn't necessarily feel comfortable, but we still do it. Why? Because we love our neighbors. We want them to be our brothers and sisters. So we reach out to them because of love. So we ask, is there any other faith? We're talking about wheedling down this 45,000, right? Is there any other faith that every single individual in the congregation, regardless of age or circumstance, whatever, that goes and knocks on strangers' doors out of love? I think we've narrowed it down to very, very few. Because some have tried it, but, the individual churches or something would try it, but it doesn't sustain, right? Or maybe there is a group, a particular church, and they do it for 2 years, and then you're done. But love is not limited to how old you are or an assignment. It's done because of love. Acts chapter 10, 34 and 35 tells us that God is not partial. And so that's the same thing. We go to everybody's door. We don't judge people. We judge them as being worthy of coming in to the truth, don't we? So that was number 2. The third thing is that love precludes Jehovah's Witnesses from being violent people or angry people. Don't we live in an angry society today? We really do. It used to be you'd hear about road rage. Well, now there's McDonald's rage. There's rage at Kohl's, right? There's rage in the parking lot. There's rage at the movie theater. People are angry, and they get even, and some sort of perceived rage. There's this thing going on where people love to pull in front of others, and they do a brake check. Why? Because of some perceived slight that they feel. People are angry, and so if we're part of the true Christian congregation, we cannot allow ourselves to be affected by the violent, angry nature of this world around us. And that extends to something that really sets Jehovah's Witnesses apart. In no country around the world will Jehovah's Witnesses join the military. Wheedles down that 45,000, doesn't it? You don't have to look at them, because really that's a pretty unique thing. And so we would never take up arms against another human. Jehovah's Witnesses have been imprisoned, tortured, even put to death instead of doing that because of love. So that was the third thing. Now the fourth thing is going to kind of lead into the fifth thing as well. And the fourth thing is that we cannot expect, though, perfection from our brothers and sisters. Just because you're showing love, we cannot expect that there will never be a harsh word, that they will never do anything to harm us, to hurt us. Why? Because Romans chapter 3:23 says that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So we're all imperfect. And that's true of every single one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Everyone is imperfect. But what sets us apart? We try. We try. We look at the Bible and we say, what's the new personality? How should we be acting based on a life of love? And we look at ourselves and we say, okay, I got to do better here. And that's what sets us apart as well. But if we look for perfection out of people, out of our brothers or out of ourselves, what's the result? Go to Psalms chapter 130, 130th Psalm with me. And verse 3 says, if errors were what you watch, O Jah, then who, O Jehovah, could stand? You see, the weight of perfection on an imperfect person is crushing. Even for ourselves, if we expect perfection out of ourselves, we would crush ourselves. We can't hold it up. We can't. That's a weight that we can't live under. And so let's look at a couple of examples so we understand that this is really the case. Go with me to Galatians chapter 2. We're going to look at the Apostle Peter. Galatians chapter 2. And we go down to around verse 11 here. Cephas is obviously Peter, and this is Paul speaking. He says, when Cephas came to Antioch, I resisted him face to face because he was clearly in the wrong. For before certain men from James, or in other words, Jewish people, arrived, he used to eat with non-Jews, with people of the nations. But when they arrived, he stopped doing this and separated himself, fearing those of the circumcised class. In fact, the fact that he showed some prejudice here even had an effect on others, because it says the rest of the Jews in verse 13 also joined him. So here, a pillar in the Christian congregation showed some prejudice. Now, he didn't keep it up, right? The Apostle Paul said, I had to tell him you were wrong. And he changed because he saw that it wasn't right. Now, how about the Apostle Paul? Let's go to Acts chapter 15. Acts chapter 15 and down around verse 37. So in verse 36, right, Paul says to Barnabas, let's go and visit the congregations. In verse 37, it says Barnabas wants to take along John Mark. And then 38 tells us Paul was not in favor of taking him along with them, seeing that he had departed from them in Pamphylia, had not gone along with them to the work. At this, so the fact that they disagreed over who to take with them to go visit the congregations, at this there was a sharp burst of anger, so that they separated from each other. Such a sharp burst of anger, they couldn't even stand to be with each other. That's from two pillars of the Christian congregation. So we can expect that people will be imperfect. But again, did they let that continue? No, they're friends. Later on, we read about them doing stuff together. So they didn't let it continue. And the thing that's interesting here is that God did not give up on them either. And we shouldn't give up on people just because they do something like that. God didn't give up on them because he uses imperfect people to perform his work. Imperfect people who are trying to do better. And that's what we do. So we ask ourselves, well, how would we feel if we felt that somebody in the congregation, a pillar, in the congregation, showed some prejudice towards us, or yelled at us, had a sharp burst of anger with us, and walked away? I can't deal with you anymore. How would we feel? Well, of course, we're going to feel hurt. We're going to have anger, but how long would we hold on to it? That's really the case, and that is what is going to lead us into the fifth or final one, final aspect of love, which is forgiveness. So it's a matter of not holding on to something, and we live in a world that demands retribution. We just talked about that, this angry world that demands they're going to get even. So we live in that type of a world. We can't allow ourselves to be affected by it. Somebody does something to us, we can't figure out how we're going to get them back. So we're going to discuss then forgiveness as one of the primary ways that we show this love and show that we're part of the true Christian congregation. Well, I might say, you know what? I look at myself and I can tell you I am a really forgiving person. In fact, it's 22 after 10 and I've forgiven 4 people already today. I'll probably forgive another 10 or 15 by the end of the day because that's who I am. I just forgive people. Well, you know what? If people are constantly doing us wrong and we're constantly finding the need to forgive people, maybe it's not them, right? It might be the fact that we take offense way too easily. So again, we'd have to be introspective and say, taking offense too easily is not a desirable personality trait, and it's not the way of love. So we would have to work on ourselves, and that's for our own peace of mind as well as for the peace of mind of others. We don't want people to have to walk on eggshells around us. That's not pleasant to be around, is it? One brother is known to say, if you want to offend me, you got to tell me, because otherwise I won't get it. And that's the kind of attitude that we want to have. So if a brother or sister walks by us and doesn't say hello, well, we've walked by people and not said hello because we're on a beeline to say hello to somebody else, right? If the Watchtower study conductor, we've had our hands up so many times, and you know what? He's called on other people twice and has not called on me. Maybe forgot our name. Or he just doesn't see it because there's so many other hands up. If we thought we should get invited someplace and we didn't get invited, you can't have everybody, right? And we've invited other people. We've invited people over and not had everybody to our house. Maybe somebody said something unkind about us. I can guarantee you every one of us has said something unkind about somebody else at some point in our lives. So we shouldn't easily take offense. How should we approach things, though, because we're hoping others put up with our faults, that we want them to put up with us, so what do we need to do? Let's look at Colossians chapter 3 and verse 13. Colossians 3, verse 13 says, continue putting up with one another and forgiving one another freely, even if anyone has a cause for complaint against another. So the first part says just put up with each other. And the things that I spoke about before, that's not worth forgiveness. You don't have to forgive somebody for not saying hello to you. You just put up with it. Why? Because we have to save forgiveness for other things. Every one of us makes these small mistakes all the time, and we're hoping people put up with us. So what about, though, if we have a real cause for complaint against somebody? We have the second image up, please. So here we see the initial reaction, right? Because when somebody does something, we're going to feel hurt. The first one is talk to the hand, the ears aren't listening. But what's the end result? The end result is forgiveness. And so that's how we should approach things. We got to understand, will we get hurt? Yes, we're going to get hurt. It happens in families, right? And this is what we are as a family. It happens in families. But the point is not to hold on to it and to end up with the second image all the time. It's not that we won't get upset, but the important thing is let it go and forgive. And you can put the image down now. And why is that really important? Look at the end, that last sentence in verse 13 that I didn't read yet. That's Colossians 3, if you're not still there. Just as Jehovah freely forgave you, you must also do the same. And Jesus, if we go back to Matthew in chapter 6, Jesus really pointed on what that means. Matthew chapter 6, verses 14 and 15. Says, for if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. Whereas if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. So the point is, if we don't forgive, we don't get forgiven. And we want to be forgiven. If we are holding a grudge, if we're unwilling to forgive, are we acceptable to God? The answer is no. So we have to get over that. How is it possible? Especially if it was deliberate. The person knew what they were doing. They looked right at me and they did it anyway. Well, love never fails, right? Love conquers all. So we really have to take a step back. Again, not that we're not going to be hurt, but really think about, is anything been done to us that is worth upsetting the peace and unity of the Christian congregation? We're not that important to upset the peace and unity of the Christian congregation. Just let it go. Remember, Paul tells us in Ephesians to become imitators of God. And so that's what we need to do. We really do need to be forgiving. So what does that mean practically? Well, it means if we're feeling ugly towards somebody, we got to fix it, right? We can't let it continue. We have to take action to let it resolve. And if somebody's feeling ugly towards us, and we know it, we have to take action. In fact, Ephesians says, don't let the sun set if you're still angry. Well, if you know somebody's angry at you, that applies as well. Don't let the sun set with them angry at you. Get it taken care of. Well, I'm not holding a grudge, but I'm not going to talk to them. I'm not going to look them in the eye. If they say hello to me first, maybe I'll say back, I'm not holding a grudge, though. Well, yes, I am. Sure I am, right? So it's our actions. It's not just that we say, I'm not still angry. And if we're doing that, if we're avoiding people, I'm not going to sit in the same row or whatever it is, we're avoiding people, we are disrupting the unity in the congregation. Now, how about if somebody just, they rub you the wrong way? You really just, their personality, right? You just don't really care for them. Well, my wife and I have a saying. If we don't like somebody, it means we don't know them well enough. And we invite them over. And that doesn't mean if we've had you over that we didn't like you. Because this has really only happened, in our whole lives a couple of times where we really, and I would say didn't understand somebody well enough. Because we didn't know them well enough. Because why? What happens is, if you get to know them and you get to know why they behave the way they behave, they become like family to you. And we've all got somebody in our family like that. Oh, that's just Aunt such and such or Uncle such and such, right? Yeah. Don't worry about them, right? And you just put up with them because you realize we're all kind of, if we admit it, we're all kind of quirky. So, you just put up with them because once you know them like family, you treat them like family. And that is the goal. That is what the love that Jesus was talking about that identifies the true Christian congregation. That's the kind of love that it really is. This world is not a place of peace. People are angry. There's a real lack of love. There's divisions. But Christians' love should be so prevalent that it's like we read in Colossians chapter 3. Let's go over to Colossians 3. And verse 14 says, but besides all these things, clothe yourselves with love, for it's a perfect bond of union. So it should be just as easy for people to see as, so have you ever been to like the beach or an amusement park and you see a whole group of people and they've got this bright orange t-shirt on or a bright purple t-shirt, bright green, whatever, pink, and on it it says Baker Family Reunion, or on it says Camp Wendy or something like that, right? Why do they do that? So they can look around and see who is in their group, and they know, and they don't lose anybody, right? And everybody else, because you all read the t-shirt, everybody else knows where that group is, and who, wherever you see them, you know who they are. And that's the way that we want to wear our love. So have you ever been in a restaurant and you look over a group of people and you think to yourself, I wonder if they're Jehovah's Witnesses? Why do you do that? No beards? No, it's not because of no beards. At one time it might have been, right? No, it's because we see people of different ages, different races, and they're getting along, and you look at them and you think, even though they don't look anything like each other, that's a family. And that's why you think they are. My wife and I were in a restaurant the other day, and the waitress asked Terry, she said, oh, you must be in some kind of work where you get to talk to a lot of people. And it came up that we're Jehovah's Witnesses. She said, you know, she says, I can tell you people. He says, I can tell, she says, because you all have this undercurrent of happiness and a happiness of being with each other. She said, in fact, there was two couples, and she's not a witness. She says there was two couples in the other day sitting at different tables from different parts of the country. They looked at each other, they found out they were witnesses, and they went and sat at a table and they talked to each other for an hour and a half. She said, well, who else does that? Because we're family. How about when people come and visit? Let's have the last image up if we could. When people come to the congregation for the first time, how do we treat them? What should they see? Well, they should see a congregation where there aren't divisions, where there aren't cliques, where there aren't people who aren't talking to one another. They should be greeted. They should, and we're getting new people all the time, right? I keep asking people, are you going here, right, to our congregation or not? But they should see that the barriers of race, age, social status, they don't exist here. And they should feel welcome from the moment they come in the door. And we can put that image down now, please. That's what we see in the true Christian congregation. That's what we see in Jehovah's Witnesses congregations. And isn't it refreshing to be part of that? To be part of this family that we have built, no matter where we go. And we would love it if more and more would join us, and that will happen. Because what's happening in the world is it's becoming more violent, more angry, more separated from the path of love. And so we're just going to be more and more and more easily seen and easily recognized, just the way that Jesus said we would be. And people will be attracted to that. So let's talk about those 5 things again. So what do we see? What are those 5 aspects of love that really identify the true Christian congregation? First one was love in action, without barriers, going beyond what we need to do because of love. Secondly, love shown by witnessing to non-Jehovah's Witnesses. Thirdly, not being violent or angry and not joining the military of any nation. Fourth, not expecting perfection, understanding we're all works in progress. Maybe even our best isn't that great sometimes, but we all do our best and try. And the fifth thing is freely forgiving others and getting over things, being like a family. That will identify us. And so let's do everything we can to obey Jesus' command to love one another, clothe ourselves with love so much that other people see it and recognize it, and show through our actions and through forgiveness that we are indeed part of the true Christian congregation.